Hello there, I'm Hayley Adams in for Esther Gitui-Hewitt. It is Thursday, July 14th, and this is Africa 54.
As South African police patrolled the streets of Johannesburg's Soweto township following a spate of bar shootings, community activists say the country's abundance of guns held illegally is partially to blame for the carnage. Why won't the world's first malaria shot reach millions of children who need it? And President Joe Biden begins his first trip to the Middle East as U.S. leader with a visit to Israel.
We begin our coverage in South Africa, where police are now patrolling the streets of Johannesburg's Soweto township following a spate of bar shootings that have rocked the nation. Community activists say the country's abundance of illegal guns is partially to blame for the shootings. Africa 54's managing editor Vincent McCory has more.
The gunmen in the Soweto shooting used high-caliber rifles, including AK-47s, leaving 137 empty cartridges found on the scene, according to South African police. This has raised concerns about how criminals are able to access such high-powered weapons. The illegal guns circulating in South Africa contribute to the country's high crime rate, according to activists. An average of 23 people are shot and killed in South Africa each day, based on the country's annual crime statistics. Gun-Free South Africa, an NGO working to reduce gun violence in South Africa through public policy advocacy, education, awareness and community mobilization, says many of the weapons used by criminals are stolen from police and private security firms.
We know that there are three sources of weapons moving from the legal to the illegal market. The biggest source is loss and theft of guns from civilians. 24 guns a day are either lost or stolen. Every single day, 24 guns move from legal hands into illegal hands. That includes private security. Cops, 2 to 4 a day. So we're having leakage from both the state and from civilians.
Nearly 13,000 people were arrested for possession of illegal firearms and ammunition between 2020 and 2021, according to official statistics.
So we tend to focus on the firearm. Ammunition is absolutely key, but what you see from the Soweto tavern shooting is over 130 rounds left. What does that tell us? It tells us that there's a surplus of ammunition. That usually can signal easy availability, but it also signals organized crime.
More than 3,400 police firearms have been reported stolen or unaccounted for in the last 5 years, according to the country's official opposition, the Democratic Alliance. In January, the country's Parliamentary Committee on Policing heard that 158 guns went missing at the Norwood police station in Johannesburg.
Gun violence is complex, and you need a multifaceted approach. But the most effective way, which has been shown to work both in this country and in other countries, is you reduce gun availability. You have to stop the flood of weapons coming into our society, whether it's legal or illegal. So you have to turn off the tap, basically. But reducing availability, reducing access. Less guns mean less dead people.
Soweto residents have decried the abundance of illegal held guns in the area, with some telling the Associated Press that they often hear gunshots at night.
The reason why we don't feel safe after the shooting is because we don't know whether the people responsible for the shooting are still in our township or not. We are not safe. We can't walk in the street or even go to the shops without feeling nervous. We're afraid because these people could still be here with us.
I can only make one comment. In Mali, those in power today are soldiers, some of whom are special forces. They know how to overthrow a regime. It's not done by tourists who arrive at an airport. collect their passports to go and fill in police paperwork. I have no further comment on this issue.
Gun-free South Africa says there are 4.5 million licensed guns in South Africa, and nearly 10,000 of them are reported stolen each year. Vincent McCory, VOA News, Washington.
Well, to help us understand the situation in South Africa, I'm joined live now via Skype from Cape Town by Zianda Stearman. She is a policy and security analyst. Zianda, thank you so much for joining us here. And I want to get right into it. Look, I'm going to leave the detective work to the police, but one has to wonder about the caliber of the weaponry used here. Where you are in Cape Town, and that's where I am from, we don't see a lot of AK-47 guns being used. We have a lot of gun violence, but should we read something into the fact that AK-47s were used? And also, is terrorism being considered here? What are the theories that police are exploring right now?
So good evening, Haiti. I think that we absolutely should read something into the fact that AK-47s were used in this attack. These are high-caliber firearms. They're not readily available to the average South African citizen. And I think that really means that, a workable theory is that these weapons particularly have flowed from the hands of police and or private security and or the military into illegal hands. I think that we should absolutely, go down the theory that organized crime may be involved in this. This may seem like a random attack, but what has been on the rise over the past 2 years, in particular with the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown in South Africa, is the rise of organized crime that has moved from drug smuggling and other forms of crime into these sort of extortion rings where they harass and really do a lot of damage to small businesses.
Zianda, when you hear mass shootings, it does kind of make you think about the kind of language we hear here in the United States, the scenes we see around mass shootings. South Africa has relatively strict gun laws. I mean, you have to be older than 21, you have to pass a competency test and a background test. But licensed firearms are, of course, not the problem here, right?
That's correct, yes. We have really strict gun laws here, even to store your guns, and even when you're convicted of a crime, you have your guns confiscated. So I don't think that the legal route is the issue. What is the issue is the theft of firearms from our security services, but also from private homes.
How do people feel at the moment? I mean, I was listening to the one woman who was saying, they don't know if the perpetrators are still walking amongst us in the township. Is the country on edge? And I ask you this because we know we come from a country where gun violence happens every day. If you come from a place like Cape Town, it's part of daily life. But there's something different about these incidents, right?
Absolutely. I think that people are uneasy on two levels. The first is that, I think a lot of them feel like these perpetrators are very much in their communities because, again, these happened in hyper-local spots. They didn't target, people who may have been visiting the township from elsewhere. They didn't target random businesses per se. These are particular small businesses and where people congregate quite often.
Zianda, we're going to...
people are really uneasy.
Please continue. Well, we seem to have lost Zianda there, but we were at the end of that interview anyway. Zianda Stearman there, she is a policy and security analyst, and she spoke to me live via Skype from Cape Town, South Africa. Moving to the Ivory Coast now, that country is denying that 49 of its soldiers were arrested at Mali's international airport 4 days earlier and posed a threat to the country. It says its soldiers were deployed as part of a security and logistics support contract signed with the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Mali in July 2019, and it's demanding their immediate release. Ivory Coast officials added that none of the soldiers carried arms or war munitions as they disembarked, but that a second plane contained arms for self-protection as authorized by the United Nations.
I can only make one comment. In Mali, those in power today are soldiers, some of whom are special forces. They know how to overthrow a regime. It's not done by tourists who arrive at an airport, collect their passports to go and fill in police paperwork. I have no further comment on this issue.
Well, Mali's transitional government affirmed in June that it would not authorize the UN mission to investigate ongoing human rights violations in that country. Well, Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara is holding a rare meeting on Thursday with his predecessors and longtime rivals Laurent Gbagbo and Henri Konan Bédié in an effort to reconcile the West African nation ahead of elections there in 2025. The three men have dominated Ivory Coast's fractious political scene since the 1990s. Gambia's former spy chief and 4 other ex-intelligence officials have been sentenced to death for the 2016 murder of Solo Sandeng, an opponent of former President Yahya Jammeh. The High Court issued the sentence late Wednesday against Yankuba Badier, the former Director General of the National Intelligence Agency, and 4 other senior NIA officials. 2 other defendants were acquitted. The defendants all denied any wrongdoing. The country has observed a moratorium on the death penalty since 2018, so the sentences handed down by the court will be converted to life imprisonment. Armed with mobile phones, tripods and laptops, the crew at Bilan Media, a Somali startup staffed entirely by women, is on a mission to break the silence around gender violence in the troubled Horn of Africa nation. We get more in this report from the Agence France Presse news agency.
Nazrin Mohammed Ibrahim isn't taking a selfie, but she is documenting Mogadishu from a different perspective. She's the editor-in-chief of Bilan Media, an all-female startup covering stories that no one else wants to tell, about women.
At Bilan Media, we focus on stories that are crucial for the Somali communities we live in. The stories are about experiences people think are normal, but these are issues that are not investigated properly. If it were to be investigated and broadcast, then we might find solutions for the future.
The organisation is funded by the United Nations Development Programme. The 6 female journalists who work at Bilan are in charge of every stage of production, from filming to interviewing to editing. And their coverage reflects what it's like to be a woman in this conservative country. Their work includes profiles of prominent Somali women, but around 80% of their output is about issues such as sexual and domestic violence, topics, they say, people are often too ashamed to discuss.
As female Somali journalists, we encourage and advocate for the rights of voiceless women.
The country has yet to pass its first sexual offences bill. It's been in the works for almost a decade. Perpetrators are rarely prosecuted and victims can face a backlash, so it can be hard to get women to speak up.
It's
a great startup for society, especially for women. It tries to cover the needs of women because it gives voice to the voiceless and focuses on the stories of vulnerable women. I think that's really important right now.
The women work out of the offices of Dulson, a popular TV and radio station based in the capital, but they're doing things a little differently.
It is different from other local radio and TV stations. Bilan covers underreported stories and hopes to raise awareness of social issues. And also we focus on shooting videos on mobile phones. As the world develops, we expect that cameras will no longer be needed. We want to move with the times.
Bilan was launched in April, and so far the team say that the response has been encouraging. In a man's world, these women are shooting for change.
And that report was filed by the AFP news agency. The world's first malaria vaccine was hailed as a historic milestone, but a lack of funding and commercial potential is now hampering efforts to deploy the shot to millions of African children who need it. David Doyle explains.
African children make up the vast majority of malaria deaths each year, but efforts to deploy the world's first ever vaccine against the deadly disease appear to be falling short. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus hailed Mosquirix as a breakthrough when the UN body endorsed it last year.
But its value will be felt most in Africa.
The vaccine's effectiveness to prevent severe cases of malaria is relatively low, around 30% in a large-scale clinical trial. Nevertheless, Mosquirix has the potential to save many lives right now. Evidence for that can be found in Kenya's third-largest city, Kisumu. Rebecca Adiambo Kwanya's 4-year-old son Betron is not vaccinated, but her 18-month-old Bradley got the shot as a part of a pilot program.
Yeah, my elder one was not vaccinated and he was sick on and off. He had malaria today, tomorrow no malaria. The other day malaria, the other day no malaria. But the smaller one, he gets the vaccine and he was not even sick.
The WHO says a long-term around 100 million shots of the 4-dose vaccine will be needed each year to protect 25 million children like Bradley. But GSK is only committed to producing 15 million doses a year through to 2028. The British drug maker has invested $840 million to develop the vaccine and says it won't charge more than 5% above the cost to produce it. A spokesperson said the company could not make enough Mosquirix to meet demand without more funds from international donors. But funding is lacking. Two of the biggest donors behind Mosquirix development and pilot programs, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria, say they are committing almost no additional finance for deployment. They've cited concerns such as relatively low efficacy and constrained supply challenges. Some officials and donors are hoping a second shot, being tested by Oxford University, may prove better, cheaper and easier to produce in bulk. International Vaccine Alliance Gavi is currently the only significant funder for a wider Mosquirix rollout. One problem is a lack of demand for a malaria vaccine in wealthier parts of the world. The huge profits pharmaceutical companies can generate there is how they say they can make products available for cheaper in poorer countries. But Mary Hamill, head of malaria vaccine implementation at the WHO, says the COVID-19 pandemic has shown how quickly things can move when there is political will and funding. But without commercial viability and enough finance, millions face being denied the protection of a vaccine against a disease that kills a child every minute.
Well, David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. Well, we're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all of our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Be sure to join us Friday for Heather Maxwell's latest entertainment report. And still to come here on Africa 54, solar power is on the rise for many Nigerian businesses. We'll explain it all after a short break.
Empowerment and humanity towards a better world.
Economic and social progress of every society.
Facts and information from key players rather than spectators in politics, business, science and technology.
City, rural, educated, or underprivileged. We care and we listen to what matters to you.
Your voices are our voices.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at other news making headlines. In a fiery televised speech in Tripoli, Mustafa Sanala, chief of Libya's National Oil Corp, rejected the Prime Minister's authority to fire him, raising this prospect of an open struggle for control of the state energy producer. Two Congolese who were arrested in November in the U.S. and indicted by a federal grand jury have pleaded guilty to trafficking elephant ivory and white rhinoceros horn from the DRC to Seattle. That's according to the U.S. Justice Department. And a World Boxing Championship belt that an American boxing legend gave to Nelson Mandela was stolen by thieves from a museum in Soweto. As diesel costs rise amid the war in Ukraine, Nigerian businesses are increasingly abandoning generators for solar power. Francesca Linag has more.
This shrimp farm lies on the coast of Africa's biggest oil producer. However, it's not fossil fuels, but solar panels that are powering the aerators and freezing equipment at this $100 million facility on the outskirts of Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos. It's one sign of how businesses are looking for alternatives as the cost of diesel soars. Christian Wessels is the president and co-founder of Daystar Power Energy Solutions, which has just finished installing the shrimp farm's 2-megawatt solar power plant.
We are at the beginning of what is nothing shy but of a power revolution, of turning to more renewables.
Daystar, which is also building a 6-megawatt plant at a factory in Lagos, says they've seen an increase in demand driven by the rise in diesel prices. Nigeria has a sclerotic national grid delivering 4,000 megawatts at its peak. That leaves businesses and citizens heavily reliant on diesel-powered generators. But Daystar Chief Commercial Officer Victor Ezenwoko says the price of diesel, which is not subsidised like petrol, has this year more than doubled to 800 naira a litre, or around $1.9 in some places. Most of that increase came after the start of the war in Ukraine.
A little bit, but not too much.
Ezenwoko says as businesses try to cut costs, Daystar is expecting to double its solar installation capacity to 48 megawatts next year.
So right now it's a game of trying to also manage expectations with customers and let them know, okay, there is a bit of a backlog, but we are trying to see how we can accommodate it. And who knows, maybe that 24 megawatts may end up being 30 this year.
However, there are some difficulties in a country where solar penetration is estimated to be under 2%. The Ukraine conflict and lockdowns in China this year have disrupted global supply chains, and delivery times for some equipment have risen from 3 months to 9 months.
Francesca Linag of Reuters filed that report. Moving now to the Middle East. On his first visit to Israel, U.S. President Joe Biden signed a joint pledge on Thursday with Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid to deny Iran nuclear arms. After signing the declaration, President Biden told the media, quote, "We will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon." The White House is encouraging Israel to integrate its defense capabilities with Arab neighbors to counter a resurgent Iran. VOA White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara reports from Jerusalem with additional reporting from Anita Powell.
President Joe Biden launched his first Middle East visit Wednesday in Tel Aviv with strong assurances to Israel.
We have reaffirmed the unshakable commitment of the United States to Israel's security, including partnering with Israel on the most cutting-edge defense systems in the world.
Biden was given a tour of those missile defense systems, including the Iron Dome and the Iron Beam, to which the U.S. contributes billions of dollars. Washington is encouraging Israel to integrate its defense capabilities with its Arab neighbors, sending a message to Iran.
You have one last chance to go back to the 2015 nuclear deal, or else the United States will support and sponsor a regional defense system that is designed primarily against you.
In an interview with Israeli TV, Biden said he would use force against Iran as a last resort. While Biden is in the region, Israel is eager to pursue deeper engagements with the Arab world.
We will discuss building a new
security and economy architecture with the nations of the Middle East following the Abraham Accords and the achievements of the Negev Summit. And we will discuss the need to renew a strong global coalition that will stop the Iranian nuclear program.
The Abraham Accords is the Trump-era deal that normalized diplomatic relations between Israel and Arab countries. While Arab nations deepen engagement with Israel, clashes continue in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, Palestinian territories occupied by Israel since 1967.
The Palestinian issue has largely dropped off the map of the Abraham Accords, and the focus is really on developing regional economic ties between Israel and its Arab neighbors at the expense of Palestinian sovereignty.
While acknowledging it's unlikely to happen soon, Biden, who will meet Palestinian leaders on Friday, reiterated his support for the two-state solution.
That remains, in my view, the best way to ensure the future of equal measure of freedom, prosperity, and democracy for Israelis and Palestinians alike.
Biden ended his first day with a visit to Israel's Holocaust Memorial, where he paid respect to the millions of Jews killed in World War II and met with American Holocaust survivors. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Jerusalem.
Africa's fastest man, Ferdinand Omanyala, will be competing in the World Athletics Championships after being granted a last-minute visa to travel to the United States. That's according to his coach. The 26-year-old Kenyan sprinter, the third fastest man in the season, had given up hope of competing after failing to receive the travel visa necessary to reach the track meet in Eugene, Oregon. Championship organizers say they were following up on visa issues for some athletes, adding that the COVID-19 pandemic had made international travel more challenging. Omanyala's time of 9.85 seconds in May puts him behind only American duo Fred Curley and Trayvon Brommel in times run this season. Oh, good luck to him. And that is our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.